I remember back in the mid 2000s when my family had just gotten more digital based television with on demand channels and stuff like that. And I was able to access Anime Network on demand, and there was this one show called GetBackers. And it had an interesting style, so I thought I'd check it out. And episodes would kind of come in at random. It was something to kind of whet your appetite so that you'd full on buy it more or less, but I would just come in every week or so to see if they had a new episode. And the episodes that I initially watched for the Get Backers were kind of all over the place because it was a very episodic series. But the episodes I did watch were highly fascinating. The story about this crew of a recovery service, you had Banmido and Genji, Amano, and they have these unique sets of powers. Ban has something called the Evil Eye, which is honestly kind of like the Sharingan, but the funny thing about Get Backers is it came out the same year as Naruto, and Banmido's Jigan, the Evil Eye, was introduced, I think, a good amount before we full on had the Sharingan. And what I mean is mostly because it's like a limited version of the Sharingan, where it could put you in a kind of illusion for about a minute in real time, but it could feel like hours in the illusionary world, and it just completely alters your perception. And I always loved it. I listened to this in English, and I thought the English was very amazing. Especially the voice of Ban was fantastic, and he would always bring the enemy out of an illusion, tricking them into seeing things that weren't actually happening. And he'd go, just a minute, as he just snaps them out of the illusion, and everything they thought happened never happened, and they'd use that moment to just turn the tide of whatever situation they were in. Now, Ban's abilities aren't just specifically illusionary based. He also has this one attack called Snake Bite, and it's like this intense gripping power that he has. Whereas Genji has electrical powers, and a huge amount of electrical powers at that. And they both have these kind of sordid pasts. And while their backstories in their entirety are pretty fun, whereas Ban has a backstory with his grandma, who was known as the last witch of the 20th century, and a lot of his side of the story is steeped in mysticism. Genji's story is the one that really takes center stage as we continue to go forward with the Get Backer story, as he comes from this place called the Limitless Fortress. This place in Shinjuku, Tokyo, that is like this cluster of buildings all just huddled together, like the most intense of intense urban areas. And they're just all condemned and broken down and stuff like that. With the lowest place being Lower Town, the midline town where a lot of Bond's association is the Beltline town, and the highest place is Babylon City, where more of the scientific stuff happened. And Genji used to be the leader of this gang called the Volts. And he used to run things back in the day, which is funny because they're all like late teens, early 20s. They're both late teens, early 20s. It depends on if you're reading the manga or watching the anime, I believe. But they're fairly young. I always thought they were like in their mid to late 20s, and it's just like, wait, 18? No, nobody's life goes in that direction that young. That's weird. But shonen series and all that. But Genji used to be someone called the Lightning Emperor, or Thunder Emperor, there we go. And he used to have this alter ego that was very kind of ruthless in how he attacked, and he would attack very indiscriminately. Now, Genji himself, he's a very sweet guy. Ban's the one with the harder edge, but Genji, he could be the sweetest thing imaginable. But when he's in his Thunder Emperor mode, he's cruel, kind of sadistic almost to a certain extent. He just has tunnel vision. Like, you hurt one of his friends, he will hurt as many of his friends as he has to hurt you. And at one point in the past, Ban and Genji had come to blows, but Ban had managed to overcome Genji back in the day, and it was through overcoming Genji that Genji ended up kind of just following along with Ban out into the rest of the world, going on these adventures. And while the secrets of the Limitless Fortress is actually pretty cool, it gets really out there. A lot of the fun of the GetBackers series is the random adventures they would go on over time. Stories that would sometimes help people and bring them to blows with other service rendering people out in the GetBackers world. There's a lot of work for hire in GetBackers, and some of that work for hire sometimes gets them involved with people that they know. One of the most recurring people they end up encountering in opposition to them is this one awesome guy who I always loved in the series, because he would just show up on a lot of their missions. This one guy called Acabade, or Dr. Jackal. This former surgeon who has blades just hidden within him, and he just brings them out of nowhere. In the anime, it's like energy blades, which to a certain extent makes a little bit more sense, but in the manga, no, they're just straight up like scalpels that he'll just pull out of any place in his body, and he'll attack with those. And he's just so intense. Think Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter. And honestly, that is an apt kind of description for GetBackers to a certain degree, as Ban and Genji's relationship is very similar to Gon and Kaluuya's, where Ban, much like Kaluuya, is a little bit more mischievous, a little bit more devious, a little bit more harder edge from time to time, but also very fun-loving, whereas Genji is very similar to Gon, a little bit on the innocent side, a little bit more naive, but boasting a lot of power, and when you get him serious, he is a serious threat. And for Acabade, it's more, he loves the challenge of taking on the likes of Ban and Genji. There's always like this rush of a challenge of taking the two of them on for him. But for me, GetBackers really was the most fun, where it was just these one-off adventures that would sometimes tie into their backstories, their histories, their relationships with other people. That was a lot of the fun of it. But once you start to get some of the answers as it went on, I will admit I lost a bit of interest, because as the series went forward, it got very metaphysical, and it started to kind of question your beliefs in what reality is, what it could be, get into things like alternate dimensions, virtual realities, because that's the thing about the Limitless Fortune, is this culmination of all these advanced forms of different prospects such as sorcery, technology, and the paranormal and pseudoscience and stuff like that. And while a lot of that could be fun, it gets a little bit muddied the further you go into the series. And another thing that struck me, especially because where the anime ends, it ends in a pretty fine place. It follows the manga like halfway through the series, and then we get to the second season, or the other half of the original of the series. It starts to branch off and do its own thing, which was fun in its own way, but I feel also like whereas it completely kind of deviates in a lot of ways from the manga, I feel almost like that was for the best to a certain degree, because I feel like the manga just loses itself in its own narrative a little too hard. Maybe I need to go back and reread a lot of the manga, but another thing that kind of got me in terms of the manga was that as you read the manga, the initial art style is pretty good. It's pretty decent. A little bit of wonky anatomy here and there. The author, Yuya Aoki. There we go. I think that's it. No, the artist. There's a difference between the writer and the artist. The artist is Rondo Amine. Ayamine. Yeah, Rondo Amine. And I'm not trying to crap all over their art, but a lot of wrinkles just all over the clothing and the fabric. A little too much to a certain degree. It's just like some people put not enough wrinkles, this person puts a little too much. And towards the end of the series, they started drawing characters' thighs like weirdly thick. I don't know if it was just the way they did their characters' pants, but always around the thigh areas that just made them extra thick. So you'd have these tiny heads, tiny arms, and then these big old booty bodies. And it was just always, it got kind of off-putting and distracting as the manga went on. I think it got sorted out a little bit once you got closer towards the end of the manga, but no, the art got weirdly experimental once you got closer to the end, and then it just sorted itself out. I don't know what that was about, but it always distracted me a lot for the manga. So the art for the manga could be kind of hit or miss in a lot of situations. Honestly, to a certain degree, I would love to see a revival of the anime, to just do it again one more time, but a little bit more with feeling, just to be back in that earlier days of GetBackers. Like, GetBackers was just the most fun in its earlier days, because while I loved exploring their backstories, most of the fun came from them just getting things back. Which, I mean, I get it. They had something else to get back once they infiltrated the Infinite Fortress and started to discover the secrets. There was something that they were after in doing that. It's just that sometimes a lot of the plot lines would just go on a little too long. Certain story arcs went on just a little bit longer than I feel like they should have. I think I remember one where it was like they were in some kind of game, I think it was, or maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like I remember them being in some kind of game or challenge that, well, it did have connections with the overall plot. I just was not feeling it, and it took up a huge chunk of the story, and I was just so bored of it after a certain point. Yeah, there we go. I looked it up. It was the Divine Design arc. And I remember reading that arc. I don't remember all the details, but I remember I was just not feeling that arc. And I think that was the point where the design of the characters I wasn't gelling with either. Like, just something going on at that point. I was just like, oh man, I am just ready for this to be over. That was like smack dab in the middle of the series. Okay. Yeah, that was before you started to get more into the Infinity Fortress stuff, because that stuff is called like the Infinity Fortress Saga or whatever. A lot of the great things about the series also is a lot of the other characters you're introduced to, like the ever sexy Haven, or Heaven, however you want to pronounce that. Shindo, the Beastmaster, always fun. Also the very effeminate Kazuki, who is just a fun character. Like, man, Kazuki and Shido, they have just like this shipping thing going on for the longest time. Although the manga doesn't go in the direction with that character, but that always kind of got me here and there. Also Mokubex, who was a fun character and great with computers. Jubei of the Flying Needles, who was just fun in general. Very fun-loving character, in my opinion. No, I'm thinking of somebody else. Jubei was a little bit more serious. Jubei was, kind of remind me of Shino from Naruto. I'm thinking of the person who was usually paired with him Emishi or Fresh Blood Joker, who wielded like a whip and stuff like that. He was a fun character who would show up from time to time, and I just really liked his English voice actor. Like, those were a few of the characters who would show up from time to time, but were always pretty cool. And they'd battle against Bon and Genji in certain situations, or they'd ally with them. It all kind of depended. And a lot of them return, like, once you get into the Limitless Fortress arc, it's just a who's who of different characters from throughout the series that just make return appearances, mostly because the Limitless Fortress is just so central to the overall story. But I've gone on long enough. GetBackers is a great series. If you've never watched it, definitely watch it. It is a decent read, but it is a meaty read. It is a meaty read. If you have time to kill, GetBackers will kill that time. But just for an overall fun time, watch the anime. It's just so fun. It's just so interesting. The characters are so likable. It just, I don't know, there's something really attractive about this series. And if fun is what you need to get back, well, you know who to call. But tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. If you have seen this series, what did you think? What were your favorite parts? Who were some of your favorite characters? And if you liked this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. And until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.